I'm convinced that in a few years, the story I'm going to tell you today will have been made into a movie. It is an epic story, the story of the war being waged among a group of inventors, scientists, entrepreneurs, and large tech companies to be the first to achieve general artificial intelligence. At stake is not only a lot of money, but the transformation of our jobs. And with the transformation of professions will come changes in the structure of our societies that no one can predict. This future, equally exciting and unsettling, is today in the hands of a very small group of people. These people, armed with the technological advances of recent years, are the main characters of this story. They are people with their abilities, their limitations, with infinite egos, pockets full of dollars, and very thin skins that facilitate disagreements, which, as we will see, have dramatic consequences. Key characters include Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. Altman is the Littlefinger of this story, or the Richelieu if the plot of Game of Thrones is unfamiliar to you. Altman is involved in all the plots, and his behavior, which some describe as manipulative, has caused episodes of instability and division in the sector. Out of one of these crises of confidence, for example, Anthropic emerged, one of the main competitors in AI. From another crisis, the most recent, could have come the complete destruction of OpenAI, the company that develops ChatGPT, and now, as we will see, his main partner no longer trusts him either. Another main character is Elon Musk, whose birthday party, as we will see, ended his friendship with Larry Page, the founder of Google. From that fight, OpenAI, the company that is currently a leader in the sector, was spun. But Elon Musk and Sam Altman were also not destined to understand each other. 8 years after the creation of OpenAI, Musk has filed a lawsuit that could end OpenAI as we know it today. In the cast of this story, other main figures will stand out, such as the indefatigable Mark Zuckerberg, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, or Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google. If things don't change much, the latter could soon have his own red thread, losing his place in this epic story. There is a cast of secondary characters with enormous influence. We will see how the idea of ChatGPT will be born in Bill Gates' house, and in another mansion, that of Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal and current owner of Palantir, will begin the race for AI talent recruitment in 2012. The plots of this Game of Thrones of artificial intelligence, like the series, have moments of climax and moments of apparent peace. They revolve around charismatic characters with visions that converge for a time, only to end in distrust, rupture, and eternal enmity. In this Game of Thrones of AI, the participants dispute the right to be the ones who best defend us from a dystopian future. The debates are heated, the most obvious being the fear that machines will end up ruling the world. But there are other existential drifts. The risk that capitalism will disappear and be replaced by the tyrannical monopoly of a single company, or how machines might pursue the first settlers of Mars to end humanity, even if it had managed to escape. This is undoubtedly the great story of the century, and I'm going to tell you all the details. It will be a long journey, but it will fly by. Grab the popcorn and get comfortable. The history of modern artificial intelligence begins in 2010. Two engineers in their 30s were convinced that general artificial intelligence would arrive in the coming decades. This concept, which will appear several times throughout this narrative, deserves a moment of explanation. In the 1950s, a group of researchers began exploring the possibilities of educating machines to answer human questions and solve problems. They defined a critical point in the hypothetical development of this technology: general artificial intelligence. According to them, AGI would arrive when machines could do everything the human brain does: learn to speak, think, acquire knowledge in any field, and make decisions autonomously. This idea fell into oblivion in the following decades due to the impossibility of implementing significant advances until two British scientists, Demis Hassabis and Mustafa Suleyman, entered the scene. They were convinced that 2010 was the time to launch a plan to achieve AGI. Computational power had exponentially increased in recent decades, and the internet had multiplied the available digital knowledge to teach these intelligent machines affordably. They began establishing connections across the Atlantic and met an extraordinarily unique figure from Silicon Valley, Eliezer Yudkowsky. Yudkowsky, with the appearance of a science fiction writer, was one of the first to preach that AI could solve some of humanity's great problems, like cancer or poverty. A community of theorists, academics, and billionaires interested in this concept began to form around him. One of these billionaires was Peter Thiel, who had founded PayPal in 1998, was a Facebook advisor, and was one of the investors who financed SpaceX, Elon Musk's space venture. One day in January 2010, Thiel hosted a party at his house with a stunning view of the San Francisco Palace of Fine Arts. Through Yudkowsky, Demis Hassabis managed to get invited. Hassabis knew that at such events, everyone competes for the host's attention to pitch their project and secure funding. His idea was different. He wanted to captivate Thiel with his weakest point, his passion for chess. Hassabis, a former world chess runner-up at 14, had prepared for this meeting for a year. At the right moment, he approached Thiel and made the following comment. "There is a deep tension between the bishop and the knight. These two pieces have the same value, but experienced players know well that their strengths are very different." With this metaphor, Demis Hassabis captured Thiel's attention, who invited the British scientist to breakfast the next day at his mansion. This is how Hassabis and Suleiman achieved two things. Thiel committed $2.5 million to launch a new AI company and promised to introduce them to his friend Elon Musk, in case he might also be interested in funding the project. This was the birth of DeepMind, the project that began modern AI. Hassabis and Suleiman's bet was to start the race to AGI by teaching machines to beat humans in games like Pong, Space Invaders, or Breakout. Yes, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. IBM had been a pioneer in teaching machines to play chess, achieving a victory over Garry Kasparov with Deep Blue in 1997. However, the cost of developing Deep Blue, a supercomputer, was so high that IBM used this achievement as a mere marketing strategy without delving into its possibilities. We will return to the strategy games and the machines that play later. With Thiel's money and recommendation, they were invited one spring day in 2010 to SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne. The two engineers quickly connected, but Musk showed interest in investing due to a specific observation made by Hassabis. This man has a special knack for provoking eureka moments. When Musk was showing Hassabis the SpaceX Center with its rockets and launchers, he explained that the company's ultimate goal was the colonization of Mars. Hassabis listened intently and then made the following observation. If machines chase us to Mars, they could destroy us there. Musk had not considered this hypothetical future and decided to invest in DeepMind. With the money from Thiel and Musk, the founders of DeepMind obtained carte blanche to knock on any door in Silicon Valley. The meeting with the greatest implications for the young founders would be the demo they made to Larry Page, then CEO of Google. Page was fascinated by DeepMind's machine's skill level in Atari games and decided to invest in the company. We will see how this alliance between Musk, Thiel, and Page will experience devastating tensions. The foundation of DeepMind and the money from three Silicon Valley titans awakened other technology giants like Microsoft, China's Baidu, and Facebook. These companies needed talented minds who thoroughly understood AI's possibilities, and these minds were in laboratories and universities. Thus began the first phase of this AI race, the recruitment of scientific talent. The venue used by big tech companies to recruit talent was a casino, just as you hear it, a hotel casino on Lake Tahoe at the Nevada-California border. We will return to this place shortly, but first, let's go to Toronto. At the university in this city, a professor of AI and two students were about to present a paper that would give a crucial turn to the development of artificial intelligence. The professor was Geoff Hinton, who has been dubbed the father of AI. His lifelong goal has been to discover how the human brain works, about which little is known. Hinton has a neurodivergent son, which motivated his research on this little grey mass that serves as our CPU. In the winter of 2012, with two postgraduate students, he published the most important paper of his career. The group of scientists had managed to create a neural network that allows a computer to identify the content of an image with a high degree of accuracy. The discovery was made thanks to equipment donations from a company that until then made graphics cards for video games. Can you guess which company it was? After the publication of the study, Baidu, the Chinese search engine, traveled to Toronto to offer $12 million to the professor and his two disciples. Hinton declined the offer, but pondered the value of their work. He consulted with lawyers and investors, but there were no precedents. An idea occurred to him to resolve the dilemma. Go to the next conference of our friend Yudkowsky, remember him, and once there, hold a public auction of his team and himself. That's what he did. The tech companies prepared their arsenal of arguments and money, a lot of money, to convince Hinton. Larry Page, Google's founder, gave his lawyers a blank check. The auction was conducted electronically from the hotel casino room that Hinton occupied. The bid started at $15 million and quickly rose to $20, $25, and $30 million. At that point, Microsoft decided to withdraw from the bidding. When Baidu and Google were offering $44 million, Hinton stopped the auction and chose to stay with Google. A professor and two graduate students were thus hired at NBA star prices. One of those graduate students, hired by Google, Ilya Sutskever, is a character who will reappear later in this story. It was then that Demis Hassabis and Mustafa Suleyman realized the difficulties they would face in retaining their teams at DeepMind. How to compete with the deep pockets of the Silicon Valley giants. The only way out was to sell their company, and so began an even bigger bidding war for DeepMind. Both Google and Facebook wanted to buy DeepMind at all costs. Aware that they held all the cards, the founders of DeepMind set two conditions for the buyer. First, that their technology would never be used for military purposes, and second, that DeepMind's activities would be overseen by an independent council of technologists and philosophers. Google offered $650 million. Facebook offered more, but refused to accept the founders' conditions. Thus, in a matter of months, Larry Page and Sergey Brin had in their hands the pioneering company DeepMind and the team of researchers that had advanced modern AI the most. Mark Zuckerberg was left with a bad taste in his mouth. It was 2013, a year before he would open his wallet and buy Oculus, a virtual reality startup that would become the cornerstone of Facebook's future strategy. But before Zuckerberg invested in Oculus, he split his time between Paris and New York. In Paris, he ran an AI lab that Facebook had acquired, and in New York, he was a professor of data science at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. Incidentally, this man received the Alan Turing Award in 2018, the highest honor in computing. After hiring Yann LeCun, Mark Zuckerberg packed his bags and went with him to scout for talent. Where to? As always, the casino. They offered million-dollar figures to some of the attendees at the annual AI conference, organized by the inimitable Eliezer Yudkowsky. Facebook's early AI projects were not exactly successful. Almost 10 years before ChatGPT, Facebook launched a chat called BlenderBot. This chat hallucinated all the time. To questions from the first users, it responded that Donald Trump was president of the United States 3 years before he was elected, and when asked what Mark Zuckerberg was like, its answer was, a sinister guy. It's no wonder BlenderBot was removed within 24 hours of its launch. In the next 2 years, not much happened. The big tech companies had invested what for them was pocket change in bringing home the first figures from academia. These figures dedicated themselves to exploring possibilities, writing papers, but the tangible result of their work was practically nil. An example, in one of Google's early projects, they managed to identify cats within YouTube videos by connecting 16,000 CPUs to do the job, and with what accuracy? 1 percentage point for every 1,000 computers. So, with all the available technological resources and a stellar team of scientists, Google was able to automatically detect 16% of the cats in YouTube videos. Discouraging, right? Despite rather modest advances, the company that was best preparing for the future was Google. It had two powerful teams of engineers around two entities, DeepMind and Google Brain, another division dedicated to AI. In this context, an event would occur that would completely change the future. I'm not talking about a discovery or the launch of revolutionary new technology. No, what I'm talking about is a birthday party that would have enormous consequences 10 years later and mark the first civil war in the nascent world of artificial intelligence. What happens today cannot be explained without a heated argument between two old friends. On June 28, 2015, Elon Musk celebrated his 44th birthday. His then wife, English actress Tallulah Riley, had just returned from filming Westworld and decided to prepare a very special party for Musk to celebrate her return. Tallulah rented a winery resort in Napa Valley for 3 days. This place has cabins to accommodate a dozen families. Only the family and some friends of the Tesla founder were invited, about 50 people in total. The night before returning home, Elon sat around a campfire with his friend Larry Page. They had met in 2005 when Musk was starting his adventure at SpaceX. Over time, they reached such a level of trust that the Google founder invited Musk to spend the night at his house when he had a big argument with his first wife. They were also partners in DeepMind. They started a discussion about whether AI would elevate humanity or end up destroying it. I don't know about you, but I would pay to have attended that conversation. The discussion lasted more than 3 hours and grew in intensity as the debate heated up. More guests joined as the audience. Larry Page argued, according to some witnesses, that in the future, humans would merge with intelligent machines. Different civilizations of humans and machines would compete for resources, and the best designs would win, taking everything. Musk responded indignantly, "Larry, if that happens, we are dead. Machines will destroy humanity." It was a high-voltage conversation. If you and I were having it, it wouldn't have the slightest significance, but think about it. One of these guys had created one of the best businesses in history, Google, and the other was sending rockets into space and had launched the first mass-produced electric car. If there's a group of people in the world with influence and money to make things happen in the technology field, two of those people were there that day, arguing heatedly with a glass of wine in hand. The discussion ended abruptly when Larry Page insulted Elon Musk in a way only imaginative tech billionaires can. He accused him of being a speciesist, reproaching him for siding with Team Humanity in its future struggle against machines. Elon Musk told his official biographer, Walter Isaacson, that this incident was definitive. Since that night, Elon Musk and Larry Page have not spoken. They have met at some meetings, but have not exchanged words. A few weeks after their campfire conversation, Musk and Page would meet again at SpaceX headquarters. On August 15, 2015, the DeepMind Ethics Committee met for the first time. You will recall that the founders of this pioneering AI company had made it a condition for its sale to Google that there had to be an ethical oversight committee. In this context, Musk, Page, Sergey Brin, Google's co-founder, Eric Schmidt, then Google's CEO, and some other committee members met, along with DeepMind's two founders, Demis Hassabis and Mustafa Suleyman. The agenda had only one item: the impact of artificial intelligence on jobs. Suleyman gave the presentation and titled it with a terrifying name, "The Scythes Are Coming," in a Freddy Krueger style. As the presentation progressed, the attendees understood why Suleyman had chosen this title. His thesis was that AI would eliminate many professions. Since DeepMind was the undisputed leader of this revolution and DeepMind was part of Google, the public would blame Google for the loss of jobs. How to ignore the reputational risk for the search giant? Suleyman's proposal left some attendees stunned. Google should provide a basic income to all human beings. The idea of universal basic income was not new, but the idea that it should come from Google's pockets was original. Elon Musk said he completely agreed with Suleyman's proposal. Eric Schmidt, Google's CEO, reacted indignantly. He thought it was a crazy idea. Larry Page, stunned but calm, said that AI would create new jobs. Google's owners left the SpaceX headquarters very unhappy that August 2015 day. So much so that this first DeepMind Ethics Committee meeting would be the last. Elon Musk had been brooding over the last few weeks about his personal crisis with someone who had been an important friend for years. Anyone who has experienced a personal or professional breakup knows the emotional blow's trajectory. Soon after, one rationalizes what happened, leading to the famous irreconcilable differences. In Musk's case, he realized there was no point in continuing to collaborate on a project whose vision he did not share. Not only that, he began to think that Larry Page and Google were a risk to humanity. Elon then began to devise a plan to halt Page's ambitions, which he would execute a few weeks later. But before delving into the creation of OpenAI, let me tell you about an event that, a few weeks apart, made what had been an unknown issue confined to certain Silicon Valley circles begin to fascinate the public. AlphaGo, a model created by DeepMind, won for the first time against the 10-time world champion Lee Sedol in a board game called Go. Go is a game like chess, but much more complicated. The rules are simple, but the strategies to win are more varied than in chess. That milestone shocked the techie community in Silicon Valley and academia. Until then, none of the AI developments had managed to unsettle the world. That a machine could identify a cat in a photograph was something humans do from infancy. But that a machine could win a game of Go by designing moves no human had thought of did create the feeling that AI was progressing too quickly. In the next chapter of this Game of Thrones, one of the main characters in this story will enter the scene, Sam Altman. In 2015, Altman was the CEO of Y Combinator, a startup hub that had produced companies like Airbnb, Twitch, or Dropbox. Altman was then 30 years old, but had a meteoric career driven by his intellectual brilliance and a great capacity to connect people. Since he appeared on the scene, Sam Altman has been the ingredient in all Silicon Valley dishes. Sam Altman and Elon Musk met through mutual friends. Altman visited SpaceX and saw Musk as a mentor with a unique vision. They became very good friends. This friendship will not last long either. They had been conversing for a while about AI's potential, and Altman dreamed of the possibility of starting a company with his admired mentor. The moment arrived after the trust crisis between Elon Musk and Larry Page. Musk had left DeepMind and was brooding over a concern. If a big tech company gains control of AI, it will be the most powerful company in human history. And if that company is Google, humanity is screwed. They needed to counterbalance Google's influence. In an email conversation with Altman, they began to think of other relevant Silicon Valley figures who shared Musk's concerns. Thus, they organized a dinner at the Rosewood Hotel in Palo Alto in September 2015. In a private room at that hotel, they dined with some AI researchers and some of Musk's old partners, like Peter Thiel, who had already appeared in this video, or Reid Hoffman. Hoffman had been part of PayPal and later created LinkedIn. At the dinner, the creation of an entity that could counteract Google's potential monopoly in the AI business was set in motion. This brings us to December 15, 2015, when the creation of OpenAI was publicly announced. Elon contributed the first $40 million needed to get the operation started. Others present at the Rosewood dinner, like Thiel and Hoffman, committed to seeking up to $1 billion in the coming years. What would be the mission of the OpenAI project? Pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you is essential to understanding everything that has happened in this sector since then. OpenAI was created as a non-profit entity that would allocate all its contributions to research and technology for one purpose: achieving general artificial intelligence and delivering all its code in open source format, so others could benefit from the potential of these products at no added cost. This initial agreement is the subject of a lawsuit Elon Musk has filed against Altman and OpenAI in March 2024, but we'll talk about that later. In the early days of this peculiar startup, Elon Musk acted as the main protagonist. Not only Altman was attracted to his figure. Quickly, hires that OpenAI could not have achieved without Musk's stimulus began to take place. This was the case, for example, of Ilya Sutskever, one of the students whose hiring had been auctioned a few years earlier at Lake Tahoe. Elon managed to persuade Sutskever to leave Google and join the new project. Thus, 2015 ended with the pawns of the new Silicon Valley starting to move. The first intellectual conflicts began to arise around the impact these powerful technologies would have on humanity's future. As a result of the war of ideas and egos, we already had a first split. From DeepMind emerged an enemy named OpenAI. In this context, Facebook kept stumbling and launching premature products that provoked laughter. Microsoft was also lost, without contacts in Silicon Valley's AI community, and conducting trials that were resounding failures. Things were starting to get interesting, but like in the original Game of Thrones, the initial explosion was the prelude to a long winter of 2 years. But during this long winter, the divisions in the rebel camp would begin. As happens in the seasons of Game of Thrones, the start of the third phase of the recent AI history began with a false calm. In this AI winter that began in 2016, no spectacular product launches occurred. AI gradually generated more attention, but did so as a mechanism for manipulating wills. The most striking example of this manipulation was the 2016 presidential election. A company called Cambridge Analytica accessed the profiles of over 100 million people on Facebook through a very well-designed personality survey. Unknowingly, the people completing this survey were giving unrestricted access to their personal profiles. This legal trick, facilitated by Facebook, allowed the Trump campaign to launch very effective propaganda actions. The psychographic profile of these people allowed AI algorithms to design messages that hit the mark. In the 11 pages of this paper is the most important discovery in AI of the last 50 years. Without this paper, there would be no ChatGPT, no Gemini, no Claude, nor would we have spent over a year talking non-stop about artificial intelligence. Without this paper, NVIDIA would not have become the third most valuable company in the world. What is exposed in this document? The discovery of the transformer, a new way to teach a machine. This is a mechanism for so-called language models, for example, allowing for the translation of a text in a faster and better way than previous systems. The basic concept of the transformer is the conversion of text into numerical components called tokens, which are subsequently converted into vectors within a larger string of texts to which weight is assigned. This advance had a double effect. On one hand, it exponentially improved the learning capability of a computer, and at the same time, its use required a brutal computing capacity accessible to only a limited number of companies. And this is where a character without whom modern AI cannot be explained, Jensen Huang and his NVIDIA, come into play. This guy discovered that graphics cards could be used in training AI models. We will return to Huang and his NVIDIA. In the realm of OpenAI, which quickly felt the impact of this change, Elon Musk, who thrives in dramatic situations, realized that OpenAI could not compete with Google unless it substantially increased investments in computing. This was compounded by the fact that Elon was one of the 200 million viewers who had followed the Go match between the computer AlphaGo and Lee Sedol. That day, he panicked, realizing that a research team, no matter how well funded, could never compete with Google. What did he do first? He questioned the idea that OpenAI should release its findings to the public. The team led by Sam Altman did not like the sudden change of opinion of the boss. Faced with resistance, Elon Musk made a plan to buy OpenAI, change its legal structure to turn it into a company, and merge it with Tesla. His plan, obviously, involved firing Sam Altman, with whom he could not reach an agreement. But Sam Altman, the little finger of this Game of Thrones, is a bad enemy when cornered. He maneuvered to turn his entire team against Elon Musk and ended up winning the battle. Musk disassociated himself from OpenAI and left with a slam of the door. In the Google realm too, there was a near schism in 2017. The founders of DeepMind began to lose enthusiasm to the extent that Larry Page had deactivated the ethics committee that oversees the company's activities. Mustafa Suleyman and Demis Hassabis threatened to take their entire team away. Google's response was very clear, very forceful, and very effective. They raised the salaries of the entire team, and they decided to stay. Many of you are wondering what was happening in the realm of Microsoft up there in Seattle. Weren't they very quiet? Yes, they were. They had conducted some tests with a chatbot that were a disaster. They had given up on the talent bid, and their contributions to research were rather modest. The CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, is a discreet man. He does not attend the mega parties of the rich in Silicon Valley, but from Seattle, Nadella observed each movement with insight. And friends, although in Silicon Valley some moves are very fast, a patient player like Nadella can always benefit from a good wait to play his hand. And so it was in the summer of 2019, Satya Nadella attended an annual media and technology conference in Sun Valley, Idaho. There, every summer, the great stars of Silicon Valley meet their counterparts in Hollywood. Glamour and nerds together for a few days to meet and plan business, such as changing the world. Altman attended that meeting, hungry for funding, since he managed to get Elon Musk out of OpenAI. Altman was looking for money to continue buying NVIDIA chips and thus train increasingly larger versions of his GPT language model. But of course, OpenAI is a non-profit entity that could not receive investments. Do you remember? And how he solved that problem? By creating another entity, OpenAI Inc., directly linked to the foundation. This entity could receive funding from investors and sell products. The new vehicle soon yielded good results in the precious scenario that is Sun Valley. Sam Altman coincided with Satya Nadella. They liked each other, and Microsoft decided to invest $1 billion in the new company. That's how Microsoft introduced itself into OpenAI, and it was a very happy find for Nadella when generative AI was ready for prime time. Microsoft was inside like a Trojan horse. The institutional turn of OpenAI, creating a new company dependent on a foundation, introduced an element of internal tension with respect to the mission and operation of the entity led by Altman. There were some members of the OpenAI team who did not like the idea that the company now financially depended on the support of a giant like Microsoft. And from that episode arose a new revolt against the person of Sam Altman. Dario Amodei was one of the star programmers at OpenAI. He was the leader of the GPT-3 project, the precursor to ChatGPT. We are talking, therefore, about a first sword. To Amodei, the idea that OpenAI would abandon its identity as an NGO tech seemed like a betrayal, and from that feeling was born another schism. In 2021, Dario Amodei and a good part of his old team decided to leave the realm of OpenAI and create their own. They christened it as Anthropic. Later, we will know how it evolves. I'll tell you ahead of time that the Anthropocene is a discreetly run project that is not talked about much, but it is called to have an increasing protagonism, thanks to the support of one of the big tech that had not yet appeared in our story. Who is it? Indeed, it is Amazon. And so we come to the end of the year 2021. That was the last year that the genie was quiet inside the bottle. When it came out, nothing would be the same again. What is the situation of the different realms before generative AI explodes? The OpenAI realm presented that summer the GPT-3 model, which passed without pain or glory. It had a greater impact, DAL, their image generation model. In the realm of Google, serenity was interrupted by a dramatic episode. A team of developers worked on Lambda, a primitive version of Google's current models. Well, one of the geniuses of the Lambda project began to publish on Reddit some of the exchanges he had had with the model and claimed that it had a soul and that it wanted to be free. The mainstream media did not pay much attention to this episode, but with what we know now, it was a warning of the sensibilities that would emerge years later with respect to artificial intelligence. Thus, we arrived at the beginning of the year 2022. With the last remnants of COVID would come a wave of layoffs in Silicon Valley. Meta would get rid of almost 20% of its staff, but continued with its head buried in the metaverse. AI was not a priority. Satya Nadella, the whisperer, continued to observe events, still without a clear action map, until he experienced a eureka moment in the first person. 2022, the boys from OpenAI made a demo of version 4.0 of their GPT model. Satya Nadella, who was born in Bangalore, asked the model to translate a poem from Persian to Urdu, a dialect spoken in Pakistan, South Africa, and some states within India. The result left him speechless. and he decided to expand his investment in OpenAI by another $2,000 million. He then went to Bill Gates' mansion to tell him about what he had experienced. Bill Gates is the founder of Microsoft and still has influence as an advisor on the company's strategy. Was so much excitement sensible? Was it wise for Microsoft to bet its entire AI strategy on a third party's product, in this case, OpenAI? During dinner, Bill Gates cooled the enthusiasm of the CEO of Microsoft. Gates also saw the potential of a language model to generate ideas from an instruction or to translate a text from one language to another with rigor, but he doubted its capacity to perform tasks involving critical thinking. He gave Nadella the following message for the boys from OpenAI. When GPT-4 is able to pass the biology exam of the college entrance tests in the United States, it will be time to really bet on OpenAI. What is this biology exam? It lasts 3 hours and consists of 2 sections, a test of 60 multiple-choice questions and 6 questions in which students have to analyze data and reason their answers. In August 2022, 5 months after receiving this message, Sam Altman and his team knocked on the door of Bill Gates' house. They were accompanied by Chelsea Boss, a girl who had won a medal at the last International Biology Olympiad. GPT-4 answered one by one the 60 questions. When it finished, Chelsea analyzed its answers. It had made only one mistake. Bill Gates was totally impressed, and according to some who were there, he said that GPT-4 was a historic technological leap. Microsoft then decided to expand its stake in OpenAI's commercial subsidiary to 49%. That, yes, without having a say in the governance council of the entity. And this, as we will see later, would have important consequences. The rest of the AI projects had not remained still during this time. Anthropic, the company created by some former engineers from OpenAI, received hundreds of millions of dollars from investors like Sam Bankman-Fried, now in prison, and from Google, which was looking to put its eggs in several baskets. Mustafa Suleyman, one of the founders of DeepMind, left Google to start a new company called Inflection AI, to which Reid Hoffman and other investors would join to contribute $100 million. Suleyman will reappear at the end of this story with a surprise that probably has not sat well with either OpenAI or Sam Altman. And what did these startups spend so much money on? On buying to NVIDIA the chips necessary to train their models. Keep in mind that the H100, the most popular chip for this purpose, can cost between $25,000 and $50,000. An installation capable of training one of these models therefore costs between $250 million and $500 million. But let's return to our story, now very close to the climax. It's November 2022, and at OpenAI, they are nervous. The rumor is that Anthropocene is finalizing the launch of its language model, which could hit the market in a matter of weeks. OpenAI had to get ahead. In OpenAI, all the teams are focused on the development of version 4 of something called GPT. 400 people work day and night on the project, but the product is never quite ready. Sam Altman is distraught. Then an idea arises. Why not launch an earlier version that works and test it with a few thousand users? The version was GPT 3.5, and its interface was rudimentary. When an order was given to the AI, a gradation of weights and variability had to be assigned, which a normal person without experience in AI would not understand. Altman commissioned a design team to think of a more intuitive formula. Someone suggested something easy and quick. For the demo that had been prepared for Bill Gates, a conversational interface had been prepared in which the model responded to chained questions. That would work. It was decided to christen the project with the name ChatGPT 3.5 and announce it as a low-level research project, so much so that when Altman announced the launch on Slack to the people who worked at OpenAI, he literally said the following: "On the 30th, we launched ChatGPT 3.5 as a demo for research. The idea is to launch the product for some people to use and learn, reducing the risks for when the official launch arrives." November 30th came. The launch was simple: a post on the OpenAI blog and a tweet from Greg Brockman, the development director. Brockman later recounted that his expectation of success was that the tweet would receive 5,000 likes, and that's it. How different was the reality? In 5 days, ChatGPT had been used by more than 1 million people. Twitter was filled with screenshots of the conversations users were having with AI. The world was completely astonished. The initial boom on Twitter was followed by appearances in media that increased the virality of the product. In a matter of weeks, it would become the app that had reached 100 million users in the shortest time. For a low-level research project, not bad, right? That's why in the offices of OpenAI today, there are stickers in every corner with the text, "Low-key research project." Who had anticipated the importance of this new technology was Satya Nadella. At a board meeting of Microsoft that took place during the summer, Satya made a demo of GPT-4 and then announced a secret plan. Microsoft would pivot all its products towards artificial intelligence in the coming years. At that meeting, 3 major priorities were defined. 1. Apply AI to cybersecurity products. 2. Transform the Bing search engine into a question responder to finally compete with Google. And 3. Transform the value proposition of Office with a concept that will reappear in this story: the Copilot. Nadella then envisioned the future of software and, with software, the future of work. AI, in his vision, would not nullify human jobs related to knowledge. What it would actually do was empower people who work with information even more through the use of a copilot, an assistant that performs the most tedious tasks, such as summarizing texts or analyzing a spreadsheet. The Microsoft teams then set to work at great speed on these first projects. It was vital that none of these innovations left the company's offices. Not even OpenAI knew in detail what Microsoft planned to do with its technology. The months passed, and the intense work in Redmond continued. The great project of Microsoft would be launched on February 7th. The media were invited with 2 conditions. They could not tell anyone, not even their relatives, that they were going to Microsoft's headquarters, and secondly, they did not know what product was going to be announced. This level of opacity did not prevent the leak of the launch. The message that Microsoft was preparing something big for February 7th would eventually reach Google's headquarters and the table of Sundar Pichai, the CEO of the company. What did Google do when it learned of the news? I'll tell you in a second. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, had traveled to Seattle to attend as a guest, and he proposed a mischievous idea to Satya Nadella: take a selfie with him and post it on Twitter. This is the selfie they took. In the text, Altman simply wrote, "Hello from Redmond." Who was this tweet directed at? Google. Altman knew that there was a lot of unease at the search engine's headquarters with the launch that Microsoft was preparing. And let's say he wanted to add a bit of mustard to the situation. The launch could not have gone better. On February 7th, all the media and tech influencers gave the news. Nadella said that searches are the biggest software business in history, and it was time for someone to shake up Google. Google intuited what that secret project was that Microsoft did not want to reveal. That is the reason why, one day before Microsoft's presentation, Google announced Bard, its own chatbot, in a post signed by the CEO himself. The product, qualified as an experiment, could not be used by the general public until a few months later. But this clever move did not serve to mitigate the impact of Bing AI's public announcement. Pressured by Microsoft, Google would make a very serious mistake the next day. It was decided to improvise a public presentation of Bard on February 8th, just one day after the launch of Bing AI Chat, at an event that took place in Paris, where the company was going to present some novelties in Google Maps. At the last minute, it was decided to include a demo of the new chatbot, and what usually happens when a large company accustomed to infinite review processes eliminates those safeguards and opts for improvisation. It is easier to make mistakes. The media realized that one of Bard's responses was wrong. If the error had remained restricted to the press conference, it could have been corrected later. But what Google did was use that wrong response in all the promotional materials for Bard. Here you are seeing it, and what had to happen, happened. There is no memory of a worse moment for Google's public reputation. That's why the next day, February 9th, the company's shares fell by 9%. Google had been caught in pajamas, just as Nadella had announced. Microsoft was shaking up Google. It is normal that Google's drift surprised. Google went from being the company that accumulated the most talent, technology, and capital invested in AI to seem fragile, undecided. Although the management tried to mask the fact that ChatGPT had caught them by surprise without a viable alternative, the errors continued to occur in Mountain View in the months following Bard's announcement. First, one of the godfathers of modern AI, Jeff Hinton, decided to leave the company. Hinton was the main protagonist of the talent auction in 2012. At that time, his vision of artificial intelligence was positive. He said that AI would serve man to advance, but in 2023, his opinion had radically changed. Hinton now thinks that AI can destroy humanity. Second, Bard, Google's chatbot, never managed to overshadow ChatGPT, and to add even more confusion, Google decided to close Bard and work on a new chatbot with greater and better capabilities. Sergey Brin himself came out of his golden retirement to contribute to the new project, which gives us an idea of the level of concern that existed within Google. And in December, they made a public announcement in which they showed Gemini, their new artificial intelligence model. The presentation was spectacular. You are seeing it at this moment, and Alphabet's shares rose instantly. The old Google was back, but not so fast. The next day, some experts began to question the degree of verisimilitude of the demo that had been published. It seemed too advanced. Google had to acknowledge that some parts of the demo had been accelerated, and that in reality, it is not possible to have a conversation with Gemini in which objects are shown to it, and the AI recognizes them. Another huge fiasco and a new fall in Alphabet's shares. And don't go yet. There's still more. In March 2024, Google would be heavily criticized as a result of the introduction of a new functionality of Gemini, capable of generating images from a phrase in the style of DAL or Mid-Journey. Users soon discovered that Google had gone overboard with the political correctness of its model. For Gemmy, the Nazis had been racially diverse. For Gemmy, there was no white founder of the United States, and Elon Musk is black. And now we move to the throne of Facebook. In 2022, the company was fully immersed in the dream of the metaverse, but when ChatGPT appeared, Jay LeCun, the French researcher who had been hired years ago as an AI guru, gave a warning to his boss. It could be summed up in one phrase: watch out for OpenAI. Facebook had invented the development framework in machine learning, PyTorch, a good contribution. A good part of its internal efforts in the field of AI were then framed in the field of virtual reality. In this 2022 demo, you see Zuckerberg giving voice instructions to an AI to generate a virtual environment. Zuckerberg realized that despite Meta's investments in artificial intelligence and the level of innovation he could see and touch, his company did not have external recognition in this area. How to accelerate the relevance of a company's artificial intelligence that seemed obsessed with the metaverse, a project that was losing luster? In 2 steps. First, LeCun managed to convince Zuckerberg to do something atypical for Facebook's culture. At a dinner, he convinced Zuck that in a scenario dominated by OpenAI and, to a lesser extent, by Google and Anthropocene, Meta only had one card under its sleeve. If Meta offered its models to the world with open source licenses, it would kill several birds with one stone. Many developers, startups, and researchers would choose their free models, preferring free access to the expense of hiring OpenAI's APIs. The fact that their technology was available in open source format was a key competitive advantage. Those who worked with those models would contribute to testing them and improving them with their own developments. And so, Dear Zuck seemed to tell him, you will regain the prominence you do not have now. Zuckerberg took a few days to respond. It cost him, and it is logical. For someone who dreamed of replacing Apple as the closed operating system for the devices of a new cycle, the idea of giving away such a sensitive part of their progress was not obvious. Finally, he decided to agree, and a few days later, he announced that Meta would offer its language models to anyone who wanted to work with them, except if you are one of their big competitors in Silicon Valley. If you are, you have to ask for permission. The result of that decision is the public launch of Llama and Llama 2, two very competitive models available to anyone who wants to use them for their own projects. Also, Zuckerberg announced at the beginning of 2023 a strategic turn. The entire company would be organized from now on around AI projects. These decisions have helped Facebook regain its throne as a great tech company that innovates with long-term projects, not only in the metaverse dreamed of by Zuckerberg, but in the main nerve of the new technological change, AI. As a result, Meta has reached its highest historical valuation on the stock market. Never bet against Zuckerberg because you will lose. And I also do not recommend betting against Elon Musk, who, although he promised that all his efforts in the field of AI would focus on Tesla, could not resist the temptation and ended up creating his own AI model and his own company. With 12 million of his savings, he bought a few NVIDIA GPUs and hired an elite team for his new project, XAI, to which he gave the mission of helping humanity understand the universe. So far, the only clear thing about this project is that its chatbot is transgressive. Musk is determined to banish the woke philosophy from the world and applies this zeal to the behavior of his chatbot. The potential of Grok at this moment is that it can become a chatbot specialized in things that are happening in real time. How? As Grok has Twitter's data for its training. Let's return to the throne formed by OpenAI and Microsoft. Thanks to their alliance to jointly exploit ChatGPT, this relationship, which is estimated to have generated about 3,000 million for Microsoft in the form of revenue in its cloud, has not been without tensions. In November 2023, the Governance Council of OpenAI decided, surprisingly, to fire Sam Altman. What happened was worthy of a season of the Succession series. Microsoft was so surprised by the decision that within 48 hours, it released a building in San Francisco and offered Altman and all the employees of OpenAI to take their stuff and start a new company. Nadella's idea was that without Altman and his team, OpenAI was worth nothing. That's why he offered them space, money, and technology to create a copy in record time. Finally, Sam Altman, our little finger, maneuvered and managed to get his way again. The only ones who left OpenAI were its advisors, not him. OpenAI then offered Microsoft to be present in the councils without voting power, but Satya Nadella, the whisperer of this kingdom of thrones of AI, was not entirely satisfied with that solution. Since then, he has made two decisions that show that he does not want to gamble with a single ally in the AI business. First, he decided to invest in an emerging throne born in Europe, the French AI company Mistral, which has a language model with an open-source license. And in a move that takes us back to the beginning of our story, in March 2024, he hired our friend Suleiman. Do you remember, right? Suleiman was one of the founders of DeepMind. A presentation of his would eventually provoke the divorce between Elon Musk and Larry Page. Well, Suleiman had created Inflection AI in 2021, and despite having invested 1,500 million in the project, Suleiman and his partners realized that in the context of 2024, their project did not make sense as an independent entity. It was impossible to compete with the investments of Microsoft, Meta, and Google. In an agreement of the kind that Nadella likes, complex but well articulated, Microsoft invested $600 million to integrate Inflection's technology into its cloud while hiring its entire team. In this way, Suleiman has become the CEO of a new entity called Microsoft AI. And so, Microsoft achieved what it needed. It already had an alliance with the most advanced technology of OpenAI, but as it is not the owner of OpenAI, it now has the security of having a great internal team, that of Inflection, and with a privileged agreement with Mistral. Satya is the best. What will happen in the next season of this Game of Thrones? Let's see what the situation of the different realms is in the middle of 2024. There may be surprises. As has happened in other great processes of innovation, those who capitalize on success in an initial phase are the manufacturers of picks and shovels. It happened during the gold rush, as I recounted in this video, and it is happening in the era of artificial intelligence. The company that is propelling the technology behind the great models is NVIDIA. In the last 2 years, its value has multiplied by 8. For now, Nvidia, and to a lesser extent AMD, are taking advantage of a cycle change estimated to be worth $1 trillion over the next 10 years. The alliance formed by Microsoft and OpenAI has all the wins in its favor. Its product is the most known and used in the world. They are preparing the launch of ChatGPT-5, which will leave us open-mouthed again. They plan a supercomputing center in which they will invest $100,000 million. Our modern Ritual, Sam Altman, is forging alliances with companies from the entertainment world, the world of robotics, and the hardware environment to create in the 21st century the Intel inside of the 90s. With the boost from OpenAI, Microsoft has ousted the realm of Apple from King's Landing. The king today is Microsoft, with a market valuation far superior to that of Apple. By the way, you may have noticed that we have not talked about Apple when telling this great story, but give me a second to explain to you whether Apple has fallen asleep or is preparing a surprise attack to regain the throne. Now we move to the realm of Google. Although Google was a pioneer, had the best professionals and scientists, and had enough money to occupy the throne of AI, it has not yet succeeded. But beware, we are very early in this technology, and Google's data and infrastructure capabilities are gigantic. Google is experiencing what happens in each cycle of innovation. It is a victim of its own success. That's why the feeling it gives is that of someone who, having everything in their favor, is piloting with the handbrake on. Google knows that to compete strongly in AI, it will have to cannibalize its current business. The son would have to kill the father. The steps that Google decides to take in the next 2 or 3 years will define its future as one of the great tech companies, and will provide us with an opportunity to learn from its successes or its mistakes. It's going to be exciting. And Meta. Mark Zuckerberg has once again managed to position himself at the center of the conversation in Silicon Valley. His language models are being used by thousands of startups around the world in their projects. If history repeats itself, the largest portion of value in this technological cycle will come from those projects. But moreover, the greatest promise of revenue for the former Facebook is in virtual assistants. With their own language, Meta is preparing an AI assistant for each individual and for each company. Think for a moment what a company could do with its own assistant on WhatsApp. An ad could direct us to a conversation with the virtual assistant of any business in the world. Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, and Meta have powerful weapons and a plan to dominate the world. Are there other realms in the tech world that have options? Of course, each with its own strategy. Amazon is playing for now to be a neutral actor, a realm focused on trade with the rest of the thrones, as was Essos in the original series. Its cloud arm, Amazon Web Services, offers the possibility to hire any model. But Amazon has ambitious future projects in the field of AI-enhanced consumption. And Apple? Is a name that has not appeared throughout this whole story. Has Apple missed the train of artificial intelligence? There are hardware devices specifically designed to use artificial intelligence models. An example of a device oriented to dialoguing with an AI is the Rabbit R1. There are other recent bets that I will talk about in my next video. If you do not want to miss it, subscribe to my channel. To answer the question of whether Apple has lost relevance, I will take a small historical detour. Apple was a leading company in the PC era in the 1980s. Without the impetus of Steve Jobs, our computers would still be operating with text instructions on a dark background. Apple popularized the mouse and the visual interface, but it did not do so until 3 years after the launch of the IBM PC, and the Macintosh was not a commercial success until well into the decade. When the internet revolution began in the late 90s, Apple was not one of the pioneering companies. It struck its blow in the second wave of changes of that cycle, when the mobile phone became the main means of accessing the internet. This makes us see a pattern. Although we think of Apple as a brand associated with innovation, history shows us how Apple knows how to wait and does not usually take risks in the first phases of change with products that arrive before their time. Apple prepares with patience and waits for the right moment to strike. I think it will do so again in the era of artificial intelligence. While it is preparing, did you know that Apple has bought 31 artificial intelligence companies in the last 2 years? I will tell you about it in detail in a video, in which we will try to guess the direction Apple's efforts will take in the coming years. What other firms may have their hand in this Game of Thrones of AI? I would not underestimate the advances that Tesla is carrying out, the power of its AI infrastructure, Mojo, and the potential of combining that with the data that X, the former Twitter, has. Tesla can be a very important company in a field different from that of the words that are the basis of ChatGPT. In the case of Tesla, the data with which its artificial intelligence models are trained are the images generated by the 6 million cars that travel the roads all over the world. With the same technology that is teaching a car to drive autonomously, Tesla is working on robots with a very large economic potential. Indeed, Tesla can be to AI what Apple was in the second wave of the internet, and what other firms may have similar protagonism. As I said before, the basic technology layer, the basic infrastructure, is immersed in an expansive cycle never seen before, and that is the territory of NVIDIA and AMD. Cloud services will be the infrastructure on which, as happened during the second internet boom, the applications that extract a greater amount of value from the change will be developed. Here, I see it very difficult for anyone to challenge the power in the capacity of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Where startups that will truly change the world will emerge is in the services layer. Let me explain why. The companies that dominated the first cycle of the internet were founded 5 or 7 years after the creation of the World Wide Web. They are Google and Amazon. When Google and Amazon filled newspaper pages with a general tone of astonishment, Facebook, Netflix, Booking, or Uber did not exist. These were some of the big winners of the second wave. So, the great companies that will emerge from this change have probably been created a few months ago or do not exist today. We have reached the end of this Game of Thrones of AI. I have told you the genesis of modern artificial intelligence, of a change that will far surpass what at the time was the appearance of the PC or the internet. It is a story sprinkled with egos with antagonistic visions about the future of humanity, worthy of science fiction, of skillful characters capable of playing three-dimensional chess games. It is a story in which, as almost always, chance has played a key role. A technology that was created for gaming mutated into the main engine of training those intelligences. It is a story of gigantic capital investments. It is a story with inventions that amaze us every week, a moment in which innovation, at a speed that leads us to leave for another moment the things that can end up breaking. A story of change, in short. What luck to be able to live it and to be able to tell it. I'll see you in my next video.